good sex is still like committing a crime in humanity. What does that mean? Well, what is good sex? Good sex is not rape. Good sex is where both partners want that sex. Even in a case of a husband and wife, if the husband wants the sex and the woman doesn't want the sex, that is not good sex. Both people have to want it. Of course, they can want it for different reasons. It's not just about romance. Sex is not just about romance. It's also about pleasure. It's also about power. It's also about soul. It's a food. Sex is a food. And if you don't have that food, you starve and you get sick. Sex is part of the soul. All you have to do is look at the people who tried to kill their sexuality. Right? The priests, the nuns, the gurus, the ascetic paths of religion where sex is killed. Those people become bitter, ascetic, disgusting, diseased souls deep down in their personality. Sex, you cannot kill sexuality from the mind. Sexuality is a nutrient. It allows the body to become a man from a boy. It allows a girl to become a woman. By developing emotional and reason as new faculties, the animal, the animal has not died. We are still animal. We've always been animals. We are human animals. The animal side is still there and it needs its nutrients. The physique also needs its nutrients and its growth. It's a personality of its own. So sex serves the growth of the soul into adulthood. And if the soul doesn't get that sex, if it doesn't get that experience, it's not possible to become a man or a woman. You stay a child for a lifetime. And how many humans are adolescents for a lifetime? In real life, the man and the woman are totally equal. They're capable of the same things, right? The old society didn't believe that. The old world, the old humanity believed the man was the king and the woman was the servant. And especially in sexuality, chastity belts of the past. Virginity was thought to be of value. How valuable is virginity? A woman who is afraid of a penis, who's going to faint at the sight of a penis. Right? That is not a woman. That's a little girl, and that is what the old society was, a pedophilia type of society, which means the man wanted to marry young little virgins. In many countries, 60-year-olds and 70-year-olds marry 15 and 20-year-olds. It's a pedophilic society. We like women to be anorexic, adolescents, and virgins, and very submissive to the man. This is the legacy of the human. The big, strong woman who is wealthy, powerful, who's not afraid of sex, who can have sex for pleasure, for romance, and for power. We don't know that woman. Look at the difference between the standards of a man sexually and a woman sexually. A woman can sleep with 100 women, and he would be considered a hero to other men, even to other women. Look at Hugh Hefner. How many sexual partners did he have? The kings and the queens and the princes and the men of power have a lot of sexual adventures for all kinds of reasons, for pleasure, not even for romance, sometimes for power, right? They can have hundreds of sexual partners and the man is a hero. If a woman has more than 2 or 3 partners, she's a whore. She's a slut, right? She's not allowed to have sexual experience. And therefore, that's why women are weaker, because sex is a force of power, a force of growth in the soul. And the woman is not allowed to have that sex. And therefore, a woman, personality-wise, has been always weaker than a man. And because of that continuous submission to the manly desires. Historically, sex is thought to be for babies. Even biologists and psychologists don't understand that sex is something more than that. 99% of sexuality exists for the growth of the faculties, for the growth of our bodies into adulthood, the growth of our animal self, which has not died because human faculties have grown, the growth of emotions, and even the growth of reason. The soul benefits from sexuality. Sexuality is a food, but it has to be good sex, okay, which means it cannot be coerced, right? No coercion. If there is coercion in sexuality, right, then it's bad sex and it will destroy the soul. The sex must be good. Who does sexuality belong to? It belongs to the soul. The soul can do with that sexuality whatever it wants. Sexuality does not belong to the state. Sexuality doesn't belong to the church. Sexuality doesn't belong to the government. Therefore, if somebody wants to sell their sexuality and has the guts, the balls, the courage to sell that sexuality, is capable. There are souls who are capable of selling their sexuality. And there are souls who cannot sell that sexuality, whether a man or a woman. I'm not just talking about women. Right? Sex for sale is not illegal. Why not? Because there's no complaining going on. The person who sells the sex is not complaining. The person who buys the sex is not complaining. Then who the hell is complaining? The government and the state. The government and the state do not own the sexuality of the soul. The soul is the owner of its sexuality, and it can do with its sexuality whatever it wants. For a man, sex is desirable. Most men, especially when they're adolescent, are very horny. They want sex. They want sex for pleasure. They want beautiful women. They want powerful sex to grow their bodies and their strength, and they want to also grow emotionally. They could have multiple partners. They can experience many women before deciding to get married. But the women don't have the same right. They're not allowed to have sex for pleasure. They can only have sex for romance, for love, for marriage, and for babies, because that's how we have forged women for thousands and thousands of years. Most men love a good orgasm. It relieves evolutionary stress. A good orgasm allows you to grow, to relax, to grow physically, animally, emotionally, and head-wise, right? But to the woman, an orgasm is thought to be unimportant. But most men don't even know that women have an orgasm and need an orgasm. An orgasm is as valuable to a woman as it is to a man. That is true equality. There's a lot of talk about equality of the sexes, but there will never be equality of the sexes unless the sexuality is equal to both. Whatever a man can do sexually, a woman can do as well. She can sleep with a man because he's a beautiful man and she wants to experience his beauty. She's allowed to do that. And she's not a slut and she's not a whore. All these notions have to disappear. Just like for a man, there is no such word as a whore or a slut. We don't have such words for a man. We should not have such words for a woman either. Why is there such a crisis of pedophilia in the church and in the people who have renounced sexuality for many, many years? Because it's not natural to renounce sexuality. You cannot kill sexuality. No matter how much you pray and how much you meditate, you cannot kill sexuality. It's part of the soul. It's a branch of the soul. You can't kill that, right? So if you practice sexual restraint and suppression for many, many years, 10 years or 20 years, your sexuality is going to be the shape of a crippled rat. And when it finally expresses itself, right, it's going to express itself as a crippled rat. That's why pedophilia happens to people who have very, very strong sexual restraint. Pedophilia is only one of the diseases. There's a tremendous anger in the animal, a tremendous anger in the physique that is not able to express itself sexually. Even masturbation is thought to be some kind of sin in most cultures. And it's hidden. We're ashamed of masturbation. We shouldn't be ashamed of masturbation. We can see murder on television. We can see blood. We can see death on television. We can see carnage on television. But we can't see sex on television. It's a very big offense. People put V-chips. You know, the children should never see the Satan. It's just like seeing Satan. We have equated sex with Satan for a long, long time. This idea that sex is like committing a crime has to disappear from the evolution of life. Sex is an asset. Sex is a profit. Sex is a positive experience, right? For the most part, right? When it's good, right? And therefore, the idea that sex is evil has to disappear from the psyche of life. There are extraordinary benefits to an active, good sexuality. The person is growing. The person is more alive when sexuality is happening. When good sex is there, you're more alive. You're more creative. You have better ideas. You have a better sense of your life. Sex is a positive. Sex is not a negative. People who have no sex, who restrain themselves, who strangle themselves for years and decades not to have any sex, to stay, say, like a virgin, have such, they fall into a hole of serious depression. And that's what we encourage in human civilization. There are many, many reasons to have sex. Love is one of those reasons. There's also passion or pleasure, right? We want to have sex because somebody is beautiful or somebody there's an attraction there, right? There's even sex for power, sex that empowers us, right? Sex can heal wounds, just like it can create wounds when it's bad. Sex is very complex, and it's also one of the biggest forces in soul growth in real life. In order for life to evolve and become better, which is what life evolution is about, life improving itself from a state of basically death. Life grew out of desert conditions where there was nothing and grew into different kinds of civilizations and species. It's arrived at the human species where there's a lot of defects in this human species. And one of the big defects is this whole stigma and prejudice against sex. This sense that sex is somewhat evil, even though we want it. We both want it. The man want it and the woman want it, but we can't have it because we have an ego problem about sex in humanity. Right? We have to understand that when a soul has a crippled sexuality, where there's a lot of fear about sex, there's a lot of trepidation about sex, there's a lot of barriers about sex, that's a crippled sexuality. We're not at ease with sexuality. We're not at ease with an orgasm. We're not at ease with an erection, whether man or woman. That is a disease. That is not a problem. That is not an empowerment of the soul. That is a weakness of the soul. Old values have to disappear. They just don't work. They're not smart to life. They're kind of smart to death.